a prop. What is that? What the fuck is that? What is that?
Welcome back to the second episode of the FZ1 rebuild. In this episode, we go over all the wiring issues, fueling issues, and I learned the significance of this little sensor. If you recall the last episode, this bike wouldn't run on its own.
Fuck you!
But it would run on starter fluid. That told me the engine was healthy and worth saving. So I turned my attention to the fuel system and started prepping it for a new fuel pump. One of the first things I wanted to do when I got this bike was replace the fuel pump and the fuel filter. The fuel pump sounded healthy, but with these old bikes, this thing had been setting for 7 years. It's just a safe thing to go ahead and replace it. After that, I went ahead and drained all the gas out and started cleaning out the inside of the tank. Even though I did my best to get most of the old fuel out, you can still see there's some residual fuel there that has rust in it. I just took some old paper towels and stuffed them in there to absorb that up, and then used new gas later on to rinse it out. Here I am replacing the fuel pump. This was a fuel pump and filter replace. As you can see, the old one on the bottom left there is pretty dirty. It's packed full of a lot of dirt, a little bit of rust from the tank. Nothing too serious though. Okay, so now we're going to put the fuel pump in, and this is going to sit just like that. So that's the front, that's the back of the tank. We're going to set it in here. Don't worry about lining it up. I'll show you how to line it up in a second. Just worry about getting it in there without damaging anything. Just like that. And then on this collar, there's a little tab right here. It's a little notch on this collar. It's going to push this down to that rubber gasket. It's also going to orientate it so that you know where to put the fuel pump. Right there I can feel it hitting the tank. Right there I can feel it hitting the tank. So right there, that little bar straight up at the front of the tank, it's perfect. So let's go ahead and blindly run these down. Alright guys, so we're back again. We got the bike torn apart. Today I really want to clean it while we have it so broken down. I got the intake taped off as best as I could. Some other little stuff that's been tied up, like this air crankcase breather line that was plugged up. The goal is to get all these spider webs and cobwebs off of it, and we will hopefully not have to do any more dirt daubers. Let's go. Alright, so we started taking this fuel injector rail assembly off because I have to get a new harness in here. And my battery died, so to bring you up to speed, I undid the two bolts holding the harness on, misplaced my injector. There's an injector somewhere. Here it is. So these injectors sitting there like this, actually like that. This one looks okay. It's a little dirty, but I'm going to go ahead and clean them out. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and continue to pull this rail and disconnect it and prepare it for the new fuel system that should be coming, or the fuel wiring harness that will be coming next week. Here's our old injector harness. As you can see, it was cut. And I could have spliced that, but I really didn't want to. So I went ahead and ordered a new used one off of eBay. Here's a throttle, the fuel shut off part that was on there. It's probably working fine, but I don't want to take any chances. Here's the injectors. I went ahead and cleaned them in my ultrasonic cleaner. They're ready to go back in. And here's our headlamp and instrument cluster wiring that needs to be gone through and fixed up. So today is all about getting the electronics fixed up and getting it going. Here's my new to me uncut fuel injector harness that we are trying to route as factory as possible. Everything went pretty smooth except for there's a little green connector that's a thermostat sensor for the engine block. The tabs are broken on that, so I hope it stays in place. So far it seems it's alright.
That fucking sucks.
After I got the fuel injector harness wire squared away, I went ahead and set the tank back on. Let's try and start diagnosing any other issues. Here, the reason I left that fuel pump spray out like it is, I was trying to make sure I had fuel pressure. There's actually a new ECU there. I went ahead and got a new one of those just to check it out. And then here I'm just checking fuel pressure, make sure we got no leaks, but unfortunately we did have a leak. Okay, that's not good. Let's try to start it. This is where things started to get kind of interesting. We were, the bike would only start when it was leaned over to your right-hand side. I didn't know what that was. I later on learned that that's what's called a tilt sensor. Basically, it cuts the fuel injectors thinking the bike's laying on its side or the bike's been wrecked. I didn't know this, so I spent a lot of time and money trying to diagnose this. Thought it was a camshaft position sensor. That was not it. But yeah, you'll hear it'll fire up here in a second. Since I had the bike kind of running and I live in an apartment complex, I wanted to put a muffler on it to make it kind of quiet down. The reason I went with the stock, so you can see here, it's got a catalytic converter in it. The header had the catalytic converter kicked out or hammered out. So this was a cheap $50 option, slid right on, fixed all my problems. After that, I went ahead and moved on to the camshaft position sensor. I think it's called a pickup sensor by Yamaha. I don't know if this is good or bad, but I thought it might have been causing the poor running issue. So I went ahead and got a used one off of a running bike.
One of my favorite sayings is smooth is fast, and I definitely fucked that up today. I was taking this FZ1 to the dealership because I had it running, but it wasn't running very well, and I wanted to diagnose it. I was also really excited for lunch, and I was moving really fast. I was getting ready to load it up, and I remembered this gasket cover. The gasket here needed to be replaced because it was leaking. I didn't want the leak on the dealer's floor. So I hastily pulled it apart and forgot a very simple step of removing this. You're supposed to use an Allen key to hold it in place. It actually slides off. These green things are magnets. It slides off, and on this shaft sits this, which is a starter clutch gear, which sits with a series of shims. All that sits on that little hole there. Well, I dropped one of the shims into the motor, and I kind of panicked for a second, but I pulled the exhaust off, pulled the cover, pulled the pan, drained the oil. I was able to find the washer that fell, spacer, whatever, sitting in here. So thank God. And I was going to go throw it all back together really quick, 'cause it's actually real simple, and take it to the dealership, but then I noticed this little scoring right there. That's hard to see. That machined out area right there where my middle finger's pointing. That doesn't look like right. I don't think that's supposed to be there. And looking at this, it doesn't look like it's too damaged, although there is a little ridge right there, but I don't know what's up with that. So I started looking more, and in the oil, there's a lot of gray and silver, a lot of small, fine metal particles in the oil. I don't know where that's coming from, and I don't know if that means this engine is completely fucked, but these bearings in here all feel fine. They're tight, there's no play, they move free. Everything in here looks okay. I just don't know where all that silver is coming from. That's a lot of silver. But the point of the story is, through my negligence, it cost me more time and money to fix this because I was moving too fast for my own good. But I might have found another issue which would have been catastrophic down the road. So we'll see what happens. But just remember, smooth is fast. Alright, so I have the oil pan from the FZ1 here, and I also took the oil filter off there. I'll show you why here in a second. Just to show a little bit more about the pan, there is a considerable amount of metal shavings all over this pan, and I think it is because of this oil filter not doing its job. This is a reusable style oil filter that basically comes apart. It's got a little magnet right here that's got some stuff, but that's more me. Basically, it comes apart. If I can twist it out, whichever way it twists out, there it goes. Just like that. And that's all it is. It's a very fine mesh that you're supposed to blow out with like degreaser or carb cleaner, rinse it out really well, and then use it again. Problem is, it's not very fine, although it is catching, if I can get that to focus, some small debris. It's not going to be able to catch this because this is like microscopic fine particles, and it's just going to go right through this, versus a paper element filter that would come factory would most likely be able to catch most, if not all, of this. I've looked all through the engine, there's no other damage, so this is my suspected culprit of why there's so much trash in the bottom of the motor. It's that the filter, it's not doing its job. And I say that because most filters, even in the racing world, you'll see K&N, some other stuff that have a pre-filter element on there. Some degree, some type of paper filament will be somewhere on the heavy duty filters, even on like big heavy equipment. Also, it's kind of like what's going on right now with the virus. If everyone's using an N95, the 3M N95 filters, those are made out of paper and cloth, and those are there because they can filter out that microscopic bacteria that's getting everyone sick. This is the same kind of logic here. Without that paper or cloth filter in there, it's not going to be able to filter out all that fine silver particles. This fucking asshole in his stupid fucking truck. I swear to God, do these straight pipe fucking pieces or the... Alright, so anyway, we're back. I'm gonna do a little test to see. So there is some silver gray oil here. I just want to run it through this filter and see if we can get any of it out or if it comes out with the oil. Oh, God. I can see it already. It doesn't do a fucking thing. So yeah, it's still got, I can't see if you can see it. It's still got plenty of silver particles in it. That filter doesn't do fuck all for the fine microscopic little bits of metal that will wear out with any engine that's running.
I mean, you can still see just the same amount of silver comes out. So my advice is not to use these things. These are trash. This is a fucking sales gimmick to save money in the short run by buying a reusable filter. But in reality, you're costing your engine life and decreasing the longevity of your motor. Run a standard paper filter. Save yourself money in the long run. Alright, this little guy right here is called a tilt sensor or a lean angle sensor. According to Google, its job is to detect the lean angle of the bike. If it indicates there's a crash or the bike is laying upside down, it'll cut the fuel injectors. The bike will still crank, but it won't fire, which is exactly the issue I had. I decided to go ahead and take my lean angle sensor apart and see what the inside looked like. Make sure whatever was in there was doing its job. But you'll see here in a moment, there's really not much to it. It's a very simple design. It's a chip and a magnet that kind of rotates in place. And there it is. There's your Yamaha FZ1 lean angle sensor. It's a very simple design, not much to it. I'd actually followed Google's instructions to hot glue this in place to prevent this issue from happening in the future. I do not recommend doing that. It didn't help me. I actually had to go back and remove all the hot glue, and then you'll see there's on the bottom prong, there's a little black mark on the residue there. Once I used a heat gun to remove that black residue, that seemed to solve all my issues, and the bike fired right up after I reassembled this. And that black residue is right there where my fat finger is pointing. You guys, after fucking with this thing for so long, I took it to the dealership yesterday. They said they couldn't help me. It would cost more money than the bike is worth to fix it. So I took it home, gave up on it, was going to post it for sale today. And then I was coming out here and I got it prepped to take photos and all that. I was like, let me check a few more things. So I went and rechecked some sensors I had touched and just gave the bike one more once over and check this out. Fires right the fuck up. That thing is so sick. And it's been setting for 7 years. And it's not even like smoking a lot. And it sounds great. It's insane. Like I'm so ecstatic right now. First thing I did when I got it running was I pushed outside and immediately tried to do a burnout. Here I am just messing around with the bike after getting it going. I tried to do a burnout on this concrete, but it was grooved. And it was basically like trying to do a burnout on concrete that's glued. Like it was sticky as shit. And you can see it just pushed the front tire without even spinning the back wheel. In the next video, I'll go over this thing a little bit more in depth and kind of give some better running and riding shots when it's not so cold and rainy out. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. Comment below if you have any suggestions on what we should do with this bike. Right now, it's really just kind of a bike for when friends come over, they can come ride. Thanks for watching.